This video was recorded live before a canned studio audience. It's Friday Night Movie Reviews, and here they are, Chris and Keith.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm Keith.
I'm Chris, also known as the CNG25 on YouTube.
And this is Friday Night Movie Reviews, but tonight we are subtitling it Friday Night Streaming Reviews. Friday Night Streaming Reviews. Because what we have done is we have gone through and watched a streaming video. You can find this movie. Just about, well, really, let's get into the overview of the movie first before we reveal anything else.
Absolutely.
All right. So, what this movie was about is there is this evil galactic empire that is spreading across the galaxy, and they're spreading their evil all across the galaxy. They're stealing resources from defenseless planets, and one defenseless planet begins to stand up against these Imperials, and they launch a rebellion.
You know, this sounds oddly familiar, like this is a movie we've already seen before.
Very, very familiar. But listen, that's not the end of it. Not only did they launch this rebellion, but they went to they heard there was other people that could help, and they would go from planet to planet, and they would recruit this new soldier that was going to help them in their fight.
Oh, okay.
Yep. Still sounds really familiar, doesn't it?
And it had like laser type swords in it, didn't it?
Laser kind of swords,
martial
big,
arts,
gigantic ships that would come out of like hyperspace and just be right there at the planet.
Yeah, and they would have this group of troopers that would come down and rain down fury upon its people.
Terrible fury.
Again, this sounds so familiar.
It really does.
Yeah.
It really does. What does this movie sound like to you?
Pretty sure it's Star Wars, right? Am I?
Star Wars, but and guess what? It's not.
Oh yeah.
This was the movie Rebel Moon, and you can catch this movie on Netflix. Now let's talk about a few things about it. It did have the them going to different planets. They would go to a planet, and there would be somebody there that they needed, and this person would do something incredibly daring, and then, hey, we like you, we're doing this, come join us.
We're putting the band together. That's what it made me think of.
Right. They're putting together the band, and so the person agrees, and then they hop on their ship, and they go and do it again.
That's the majority of the movie, is just putting the band together. I mean, for the most part, to like the last 45 minutes of the film. Well, part one, we should say.
And they do it 7 times. 7 different times they do it. Over and over and over. Now, let's talk about this. Is there violence in this movie? Oh,
absolutely. For a PG-13 film, it's not heavy on blood, but there is a lot of death.
Right.
A lot of death.
A lot. Now, this isn't your regular run-of-the-mill stormtroopers falling over because they missed 75,000 targets, and somebody comes in and shoots them one time. No, this is some really this can get a little bit gory. Language and profanity.
Normal PG-13 language,
right,
for the most part. I didn't really notice anything else other than that.
Right. So it was violent, but it stayed away a little bit from the language and the profanity. Now, as far as like adult situations, what did you notice?
Part one definitely had one. The I guess we're going to call them the evil space troopers because I don't think they actually had a name. Maybe mercenaries or something.
The Imperium, that's what they were
the
called.
Imperium, yeah.
The Imperium. Does that sound familiar to you guys? Let's see. Empire. Imperium. Okay.
But they basically try a pre-assault on a young woman that was serving them water. And it made me kind of sit back in my seat and said, well, the 8-year-old in me would have been like, I don't understand what's going on. And it definitely is not appropriate for the little ones. Like that was the scene that caught my eye. Other than that, in part 1, that's the only scene I saw. And then they had a romance type scene in part 2. Because we are, just to make it clear, we are doing part 1 and part 2. And yes, we do know there is a part 3 supposedly on the way.
Exactly.
And as a disclaimer, they did just release this past weekend the director's R-rated cuts of these. This review is not the R-rated cut. This is just the regular standard PG-13 cut. And we're already saying just already that the PG-13 cut's not appropriate for young children.
Right.
So I can only imagine what's in the director's cut.
So what you'll want to do when you watch these movies, don't include your children. It's a sci-fi film. It's called Rebel Moon. It sounds a lot like your regular run-of-the-mill Star Wars movies, but it's a lot more. It's a lot more violent, and it's there are a few more adult situations in it. But I will say this about the movie. It is very action packed. It's a very action packed movie. There's the action parts are action packed. Okay. There's what about any comedy? Did you really notice any comedy in it?
No, every now and then there'd be like some small little quip, but for the most part, the characters were very stale.
Right.
Just very stoic type characters.
Right.
And honestly, not that rememberable. There's only one character I even remember. I remember Titus, who was the general, and then the main character was Cora, right?
Right, something like that.
And other than that, I don't remember like the bad guys' names. They all had like
sounded kind of like Roman
soldier names,
sort of like Roman names. They tried to put a little romance in it. And we'll get into more of that later, but that's really about all it is. It's action packed, not a whole lot of comedy. They tried to put some romance in it, and it's got some drama in there. So let's get down to the nitty gritty of this. Is it worth the trash? Is it worth the cash, or is it trash? But we need to kind of modify that a little bit, because you're not going to the theater to see this one. You're basically sitting at home. Is it worth your time? So we'll leave it at that. Is this movie worth the time? Because we need to bring something out in this. Part 1 is over 2 hours long, and that's not the director's cut, guys. That is the regular. That is the first release, over 2 hours. Part 2 is over 2 hours. And so here's the reason why the films are over 2 hours. If you will look in the credits, or if you know anything about this movie, who made it?
The wonderful Zack Snyder.
Zack Snyder. So Zack Snyder wrote the story. Zack Snyder helped produce it. Zack Snyder directed it. There was not really one thing that Zack Snyder did not have his hand in this movie. And so if you guys will remember, anytime you watch a Zack Snyder movie, what is he most famous for when he makes these movies?
Oh, it's the slow motion.
It's just all of a sudden.
And then speed it up really fast.
And then he speeds it up real fast. And you got this really dramatic music going on right behind you when he does the slow motion thing. But the thing is,
He just never got over doing the movie 300. That's the problem.
The
And
thing is, and if you notice, all of his slow motion parts were at the most inopportune and dumbest moments
Like,
in the movie.
I didn't mind it so much in the action sequences because you kind of get used to it with a Snyder film.
Which is pretty cool. I mean,
Yeah.
it's pretty cool
Yeah.
seeing somebody hit with a laser, them being kind of blown apart a little bit in slow motion. That's
Yeah.
actually pretty neat.
Yeah, and that's part of his signature style. Like,
Right.
when you watch it,
Right.
you know it's a Snyder film.
Right.
But then he decides to do it in scenes that didn't need it. It was very unnecessary. And part 2 is more guilty of it than part 1. You literally have a scene
when
where
they're walking.
yeah, or thrashing wheat.
There is a scene. I'm not kidding with you. There is a scene in in part 2 where the villagers are harvesting wheat, and they harvest the wheat in slow motion, and then they're threshing the wheat in slow motion. It's painful to watch.
Oh yeah,
And there's the one scene that you were talking about.
the filling of the cantina. Titus literally puts his cantina into the water bucket, and it shoots it from underneath, so you can see the hand in the cantina going into the water, slow motion style, filling it up with water, him lifting it out of the water in slow motion and taking it to his lips. It just was so unnecessary. I'm like, okay, Snyder, it's like, instead of taking the criticism of your slow motion style, he just decided to just throw it all out there.
He took it to a whole different level in this movie. There were so many scenes that were ridiculously slow mode. If he had cut all of the slow motion scenes out of both parts, then you probably could have put both parts together and made a 2.5 hour movie.
Yeah, and the thing that's unfathomable to me is the fact that they've put out the director's cut. That director's cut, just part 1 alone, is almost 4 hours now.
4 hours.
And then
Can you imagine 4 hours of slow motion?
No, thank you. And then you're going to sit through part 2, and it added 45, I think, minutes to it. I was looking at the runtime of both versions, and I was like, no.
And it brings that one up to over 3 hours.
Yeah.
So a total of over 7 hours, and a majority of it is probably slow motion.
Yeah, and it's filler. He has so much
Right.
filler in his movies. Like, I appreciated that they finally released the Snyder cut of Justice League.
Right.
But you were going to get exactly what you got. Right. Lots of slow motion and unnecessary scenes.
So here's the background of this movie. This is what happened. Zack Snyder got this idea in his head that he wanted to make a Star Wars film. So he approached Lucasfilm and Disney and said, "Hey, here is a Star Wars story, and I would like to do this." So they looked at it, they read the script, and they came back to him and they said,
"We're gonna pass."
No. They just told him flat out no, and so he was like, "Oh, okay, then I'll make it myself." So not only do we now live in an era where a talentless artist can go and throw down some music tracks and sell an album.
Yep.
We now also live in an era where a movie producer, director, or writer, or / all three, can make a garbagey film and put it out there themselves.
Yeah.
So
I'm looking at Netflix, and it's like, are you not looking at this guy's track record? Like, yes, 300 was a great film. Yes, his remake of Dawn of the Dead was great. But what followed it, he basically single-handedly brought down the DC universe. And I know a lot of people will disagree with me on that. But I'm sorry, he did not help them. He hurt them in the long run.
Right. And so what you have in this movie is you have a lot of Star Wars ripoff kind of stuff. Number one, it's called Rebel Moon. It's called Rebel Moon.
It's an empire fighting rebels.
And the whole storyline, just like he said, an empire fighting rebels, and rebels standing up against the empire. They are actually called the Imperium. The bad guys are called the Imperium. Now, there's a little bit of a storyline that goes behind it, but it's terrible as well. This movie, in my opinion, is terrible. I don't think it's worth your time. I don't think it's not even worth being on Netflix and streaming. So if you want to, I would suggest, what do you, I believe it's terrible. So how do you feel about it?
Oh, I agree. I say watch this review and not waste your time.
Right.
That's what I would recommend.
Yeah. Another one of those, we watched it for you.
So you don't have to.
So you don't have to. Exactly. So I don't even feel like it's worth streaming. I don't feel like that it's worth watching. The only way that I would justify this film, this movie being watched, is if you sat down with a group of your buddies and you guys just sat and made fun of it.
Yeah, you just riffed on it like Riff Tracks, or they used to be known as Mystery Science Theater 3000.
Right. That would be the only way that this movie would be enjoyable and be really watchable, is by doing it that way. So I give this movie a grand total of, I'll give it, you know what? Special effects were okay in it.
Yeah, I didn't mind that. The action scenes were fine.
Like we mentioned earlier, you got laser guns, just like Star Wars.
Laser swords.
You've got ships, just like Star Wars. You've got big ships, incredibly big, like threatening ships, just like Star Wars. You have laser swords.
You have a cybernetic villain in it that's hard to get rid of,
like Star Wars.
Just like Star Wars. Yeah, so it's a blatant ripoff of Star Wars, and you know it has to be bad when Kathleen Kennedy says no.
Right.
Considering that she just put out The Acolyte. Now the question on your mind is, which one was worse, The Acolyte or this? It's sad that I'm going to put a Zack Snyder movie before a Star Wars project. Where I gave The Acolyte 0, this one I'm going to give a 2.
Yeah. Yeah, so you give it 2 sodas?
2 sodas out of 10, yeah.
Okay, and I agree. I would give it 2 popcorns. 2 popcorns out of 10. And really, it's all it's worth. And the only reason to me that it's really worth that much is if you sat down with a group of your friends and you guys just laughed at it, ripped on it throughout the whole thing. And if you want to, I would suggest, if you're going to watch it, just watch the regular releases. Please don't torture yourself with the director's cuts, because that's just way too much. Way too much.
There's only so much Snyder one person can take.
Right. Only so much. And there's only so much slow-mo that you can actually sit through before it actually gets too monotonous. So that's our cue to go.
Yep. Remember to like, share, and subscribe. Please comment on the video. If you have any suggestions for any future videos, please let us know. And remember to ring that bell for notification for when our next video drops.
Thank you very much for watching. This has been Friday Night Movie Reviews. I'm Keith.
I'm Chris.
And thank you for joining us. We appreciate you being with us. Like he was saying, subscribe to us. Look, we're wanting to grow our membership here. So please do give us a subscribe and tell your friends, your family, and everybody that you want to spread the news to about Friday Night Movie Reviews. Thank you so much. We appreciate you. We'll see you next time.